The call came in late evening, his voice calm and deep as always. He said he needed help fixing something at home, a simple request that shouldn't have made my heart beat faster. But it did. I told him I'd come by after dinner. My father was away that week, so there was no reason to say no. Still, as I changed my shirt and looked at myself in the mirror, I felt that strange mix of nervousness and excitement that had no name. The road to his house was quiet, dimly lit by the scattered street lamps. I had been there many times before with my father, but tonight it felt different. My palms were sweating slightly as I walked up to his door and pressed the bell. When he opened it, he wasn't in the usual crisp clothes I was used to seeing him in. Instead, he wore a soft t-shirt and loose pants, casual and comfortable. His hair was slightly messy, and his smile, gentle but uncertain, made me feel both safe and uneasy. He led me inside, the faint scent of cologne and wood polish filling the room. The house was silent except for the faint hum of music playing somewhere in the background. He offered me tea, the kind he always made perfectly, and we sat in the living room. The lights were dimmer than usual, warm and soft, casting long shadows across the walls. He asked about my studies, my plans, the usual questions, but there was something in the way he looked at me between sentences, something unspoken that I tried to focus on his words, but my eyes kept drifting to his hands, the way they moved when he talked. I remembered how kind he'd always been, how he'd treated me like family since I was a child. But tonight, there was a distance between those memories and this moment, a quiet awareness that neither of us could deny. He laughed at something I said, his eyes lighting up for a second, and I felt that rush again, like I was standing too close to something I shouldn't touch. After a while, he got up and asked me to help move a small shelf in the corner of the room. It wasn't heavy, but when I stood next to him, our arms brushed, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The air seemed to shift, heavier somehow. I could hear my own heartbeat. He looked at me, then quickly away, pretending to adjust the shelf again. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and smiled awkwardly that we sat back down, but the space between us felt charged. He handed me my cup of tea again, and when his fingers touched mine, I froze. It was just a touch, small and accidental, yet deliberate enough to make my chest tighten. He didn't pull his hand away immediately, and I didn't either. Our eyes met, and in that single second, the silence said everything words couldn't. He cleared his throat softly and leaned back, trying to act normal, but the air refused to go back to normal. I looked down at the cup, tracing the rim with my thumb, pretending to be calm. Inside, I was trembling. The conversation drifted to lighter things, music, movies, the city at night, but underneath, something else pulsed quietly. Every laugh, every pause, every glance felt like it carried a hidden meaning. It wasn't planned, it wasn't even spoken, yet it was there, alive between us. When it was time to leave, I stood up slowly, half hoping he'd say something to make me stay, half praying he wouldn't. He walked me to the door, his expression unreadable. As I reached for the handle, he said softly, "Thanks for coming." I turned to reply, and our eyes met again. It lasted only a breath, maybe two, but it felt endless. I stepped out into the night air, cool and sharp against my skin. As I walked away, my heart was still racing, my thoughts tangled. I didn't know what had just begun, or whether I should wish it hadn't. All I knew was that something had changed forever, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. I couldn't stop thinking about that night. The way he looked at me, the silence that lingered after I left, the touch that stayed on my skin long after it ended. For days, I tried to shake it off, telling myself it meant nothing. But each time my phone lit up, I hoped it was him. When his message finally came, just a simple "Are you free tonight?" my heart skipped before I could even think that. I told myself it was just another visit. Nothing more. But the truth was already alive somewhere inside me. I wanted to see him again, even if it made no sense. Even if it was wrong. When I reached his house, the lights were softer this time, and the music slower. He greeted me with the same smile, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something that made me feel like I wasn't the only one fighting a battle inside, that we sat together again, closer than before. He spoke quietly, his voice gentler, more personal. He told me how the house felt too empty most nights, how his silence had become a kind of companion. He said he missed having someone to talk to, someone who listened without judgment. His words hung in the air, heavy and honest. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. There was a pause, long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat again. Then he looked at me and said softly, "You remind me of something I've forgotten, a warmth I thought I'd lost." The words weren't meant to be romantic, but they carried something more. My breath caught for a second. He noticed, and in that stillness, everything between us became clear that he moved a little closer, slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. His hand reached out, resting lightly on my arm, and the warmth of it sent a shiver through me. I looked up, and our eyes locked again, not as a guest and a friend's son, but as two people who had stopped pretending. Time felt suspended. There were no rules in that silence, no labels, no right or wrong. Just the closeness of two souls drawn to each other against their better judgment. His hand brushed against my cheek, a gesture so gentle it almost broke me. I could feel the hesitation in him, the fear of crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But neither of us spoke. The moment moved on its own, like something inevitable. When he leaned in, I didn't resist. The world outside vanished. No names, no family ties, no consequences, just a heartbeat that matched mine. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was quiet, filled with years of hidden thoughts neither of us had ever dared to speak. Every touch felt like confession, every breath a promise we couldn't keep. Afterward, we sat in silence, the air thick with the weight of what we had done. He looked away first, guilt flickering in his eyes, but also something softer, peace, maybe, or relief. I wanted to speak, to say something that could make sense of it, but there were no words big enough. Everything felt both right and wrong at the same time. He reached for my hand again, this time holding it tightly, not with desire, but with gratitude. "You should go before it gets late," he whispered. I nodded, though part of me didn't want to move. When I finally stood up, he followed me to the door, his expression caught between tenderness and regret. I stepped outside, the night breeze cool against my flushed skin. The world seemed quieter, slower, as if it too was holding its breath. I walked home in silence, my thoughts heavy but strangely calm. What happened shouldn't have happened. I knew that. Yet a small part of me couldn't see it as a mistake, that IT wasn't just about what we did. It was about what it revealed, something I'd always buried deep inside, something that now refused to go back to sleep. That night didn't just change how I saw him. It changed how I saw myself. The next morning, everything felt different. The air in my room was heavy, and even the sunlight seemed uncertain as it touched the floor. I replayed every second of the night in my mind, his voice, his touch, the quiet moments that lingered after. What should have been a mistake didn't feel like one. But the guilt was still there, quiet and sharp. He was my father's friend, someone I had trusted my whole life. And now, there was no way to go back to how things were before. That I didn't hear from him for a few days. The silence felt longer than it really was. I wanted to message him to ask if he was okay, but every time I picked up my phone, I stopped myself. What would I even say? That I missed him? That I couldn't stop thinking about him? Those words didn't belong in the world we lived in. They only existed in that one night we both pretended didn't happen. When his name finally appeared on my screen again, it was a simple message: "Can we talk?" I went. I told myself it would be just to clear things up, to make sure he knew we couldn't cross that line again. But the moment I saw him standing there, all my careful words disappeared. He looked tired, softer somehow that we sat across from each other, not speaking at first. The air between us was filled with everything we couldn't say. Then he sighed, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't plan for any of this," he said quietly. "I don't know what came over me. I just felt something I couldn't ignore." His honesty broke me a little. I wanted to be angry, to blame him, but I couldn't, because I had felt the same. I told him that. He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "I know," he said. "That's what makes it harder. We talked for a long time, not about what we did, but about what it meant." He said it wasn't love, at least not the kind that could last. It was connection, a brief, fragile moment where two lonely people reached out and found something that made them feel alive again. I understood, deep down, I knew he was right. He made tea again, the same way he always did, and we sat in the silence that used to feel warm but now carried weight. When it was time to leave, he walked me to the door like before. There was no hesitation this time, no hidden meaning in his touch. Just a quiet goodbye, gentle and final. That night, lying in my bed, I felt the ache of something ending. I thought about my father, about how much he trusted him, about the secrets now sitting between us that would never be spoken aloud. But alongside the guilt was something else, understanding. What happened had shown me a part of myself I'd spent years ignoring. It forced me to look at who I really was, not who I was supposed to be. Days turned into weeks. We didn't see each other again. Sometimes I'd pass his street, my heart catching for a moment, wondering if he was home, if he thought of me. I never went back. There was no need. Some stories don't need to be continued. They just need to be remembered that I still think about that night sometimes. Not with regret, but with quiet acceptance. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't right, but it was real. And it changed me. It taught me that love, in all its strange and complicated forms, doesn't always fit the rules we're given. Sometimes it arrives in silence, stays for a moment, and leaves behind a truth you can't unlearn, that he wasn't meant to stay in my life. He was meant to show me something, a mirror I didn't know I needed. And though we will never speak of it again, I know a part of me will always carry the memory of that night, tucked somewhere deep between guilt and gratitude, where only I can reach it.